Good afternoon, everybody. Juanita, how are you today? Great to see
I'm well,
you
Mark.
again.
How are you?
That's why I feel much better today. That I'm back at the office rather than sitting in the car in the middle
In
of
the
a
car.
sort of
With
deserted street in the middle of nowhere.
Well, it wasn't that deserted. There were trucks coming down the side of the road. But good
I
to
know.
see you back in your natural habitat. And I'd like
Well,
to
that's
point out my new background. I
I'm
was
very impressed with that. Very impressed.
I was
You
inspired
saw
by my
Tom.
colleague.
That's right. You saw Tom using the same spot the other day, and it looks so.
I did.
Well,
I
although
did.
it's interesting. It's been interesting watching some of the people in the building across the road from you occasionally, what they get up to. Be- be-
We don't want to even
behind.
know what they get up
No,
to.
no, you don't. You don't want to know. You don't want to know. But anyway, welcome everybody today. And today our topic is the tactical team. So if I can just take a sec, Juanita, the tactical team was one of those things. It's born of the fact that I used to think about what would happen, and especially in situations where, let's say it's a non-farming business. It's like a car dealership, for want of a better example. And dad's work in the dealership all the time. Mum's not at work there. The kids aren't involved in the dealership at all. And that can be replicated whether it's man or woman in any sort of business. The spouse is not involved in the business, and if the operating spouse passes, and the remaining family, spouse, the rest of the family have no idea how to run the business, apart from where it is and where the checkbook is, they don't know much more about it. It's really important. It was one of the things that we decided to put in our process was to help put together a tactical team, for want of a better expression, so that when the person passes away, there's a team of people who are really capable and understand and so on how to help keep that business running until such time as it's either sold or they find someone else to take it over to run it on behalf of the family or whatever. So and it's just so appropriate in so many levels. Even for people where mum and dad work together or the kids are involved in the business, it's still just as relevant because of the fact of what I always refer to, Juanita, as the emotional paralysis that strikes when one person dies, is as capable as everyone else is. They're running around basically like chooks with their head cut off because they just are paralysed by grief and sadness and so on. And so it's very important to make sure that there's a team of people that can step up during that period while everyone's grieving and make sure that the business doesn't degrade or fall off or anything like that. So your thoughts, your experience on creating such a team? You look very tall today, Anita.
Do I have to drop my chair down, perhaps?
No, you have to sit tall. Not that I feel
I look
intimidated.
taller than you, don't I?
That's okay. It happens.
I couldn't agree more. It's really important to have that team with their different strengths they bring to the situation, and let's call it the A team. And I would probably make one comment before we get into who should be in that team, is that often when we talk about this concept to clients, is their first worry is that there's too many cooks, it'll spoil the broth, or alternatively it will cost too much or cost more because there's too many people involved. And from experience, I can clearly say that when you have this team in place and ready to go and do their job, it will actually make things less expensive and less difficult for those left behind and for your estate, because it's when you leave people behind who have to sort of scavenge for information and they don't know where everything is, and people are ringing people, and that's when it becomes expensive and drawn out and hard work and difficult. So to have this team in place actually makes things more efficient.
Absolutely. Look, I remember when most of the work I was doing was in the car industry, as you'd remember. There was a lot of the guys. And the good thing was that most of these guys I met initially, they were either personal friends or whatever, but I did a lot of work, as you know, speaking at the dealer comparison meetings where you get all these, you get some of the most successful car dealers in Australia all sitting in one room together, sharing ideas and sharing their numbers and all these sorts of things. And because they weren't competing dealers, for example, one might be from Cairns, one from Mackay, one from Sydney, one from Perth, and so on, they weren't competing with each other in the marketplace. And so they were really happy to share information, and they were good mates. You know, like most of the guys in those groups, they ended up in groups together because of, because of the level of business, but also because they were good mates. And oftentimes when I'd be talking to them about, you know, who would they want to be in their tactical team, they'd nominate a couple of other guys in their dealer comparison groups because they were in the industry, they respected their capability, and they all loved each other enough to say, well, you know, like, you know, Harry, if you died, mate, I'll come in and I'll make sure the business keeps running for a while until we can find a general manager or a new DP, or the factory can sell it to someone else, or that they would keep it going for the love of their mate. And because they were so capable, because they were such good producers and they all respected each other, it was just it was like everyone was prepared to do it for the other guys in their group. So so that's kind of what you look for. Sorry. I know you've got to talk. I'll be one more second. But it was like, you know, so it's not just in the car business you can do that. I mean, you know, I'm sure graziers, farmers would do exactly the same thing. If one of their neighbours, you know, got hit by a truck or whatever, they'd do the same thing. They'd go in for the family and help mum or the kids manage the thing until they could get it moving.
Yeah, and it's that relationship of trust and respect, and you know that those people that can assist those that you left behind after your death to look after those affairs.
Yeah, I mean, there's other cases too where you know, your mate up the street might try and cut your lunch on the business, so to speak, too, if you weren't there too, if you weren't careful. So you need to be thoughtful and careful that it's not a competing, you know, someone that's going to try and come in and steal the business out from under your family too. So, but that's where you need to be thoughtful in regard to who you put into your team. Any other thoughts before we go through the list?
Well, that's a good segue into who should be in your team, Mark.
Absolutely. Look, so the tactical team, we have a list here, as we do. We have frameworks for everything we do in our business.
Love a good list. Love a good checklist.
Love it. Yeah. I need a good list. So there you go. So we start off. I mean, the key people in your tactical team are going to be the executors of your estate to start with. I mean, because they're the ones who are going to be taking control of the will. So before we get to the people who are going to help run the business and so on, do you want to talk about, and I know we've touched on this before, but how important it is to choose your executors? And I'm just going to lead off here by saying I always recommend there's more than one. And the other thing I say is, if you're going to have family members, you either have all your kids or you don't have any of them, because there's nothing more likely to cause a blue than if you choose one of your children without the others, unless there's a very good and practical reason.
That's right, and you're correct. It's always recommended to have more than one, either having joint executors, so two acting together, or alternatively having your executor and a backup who will act if that person's predeceased or can't act. And the reason, obviously, is if something happens to one of them, you don't want to have to redo your will, or you don't want a will without any executor. So that's always recommended advice, to have more than one in place. We've talked before about what the executor does, but for those that need a little recap or aren't familiar with the term, your executor is the person named in your will, and their responsibilities are basically 3 steps. So collecting your assets, identifying and paying your liabilities, and then carrying out the wishes that you've left in your will. So the sort of person you want there is someone who is capable of doing that job, both emotionally and mentally, I guess, and practically. And you want someone that you're comfortable with, someone that you trust, someone that knows you and your wishes and your affairs is basically the ideal sort of traits that you want in your executor.
Sure. I think we've probably touched on this before too, but my take always, Juanita, is that you have someone who's very good with numbers. So you've got the clinical accountant, so to speak, not necessarily an accountant, but I mean the clinical person who's going to be very good at making sure the numbers all work and the business is driven. And when Junior turns up and says, "Dad, I want a Ferrari," you know, he can say, no, that's not going to happen. But you also need someone who has a heart, who understands the children, who understands the spouse, and what the spouse who's passed would have wanted for their kids, whether they wanted them to go to boarding school or whatever it was. So you've got compassion mixed with practicality and good business sense. I think is always a good combination to look for when you're choosing executives.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Look, the next we've talked about that a lot. So the next one is, and I put this down as who to take principal advice from. And once again, I'm sure this has come from my days dealing with a lot of car dealers, because they always had a mate who was in the industry who they knew would know how to run their dealership, and they trusted them with their life. And we always say to people when we're going through this, who do you trust? Who would you want your family to trust and take advice from? Who would you want them to avoid? Because you can also have good mates who you don't want anywhere near your checkbook. So as I say, the next thing we're looking for, take principal advice from. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an executor does it, but it's someone who's maybe a trusted family friend who the family are going to feel more comfortable having a chat with, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So as separate from the role of executor, it may be someone that you trust and respect, someone that you know can guide your executor or your family after you've passed away. And the example you gave, Mark, is a great example. So for those who perhaps have a rural business or have a motor industry, or any industry at all, or any business, any hobby, I guess, we don't want to give the concept that you need to have a conglomerate or a huge business. But if you want someone with that bit of expertise that can guide the people that you've left behind, your family and your executors, this is the perfect example. So for myself, if I had my own legal practice, and I passed away, my husband would have no idea what to do with the legal practice. So here I would be leaving the name of someone who I trust, who's obviously a lawyer, who knows how these things work, that can help guide him and help him or my executor through that path of what to do.
And she lives in Toowoomba,
Of course, it'd be someone from Murdoch's. Yeah. Of course, it'd be someone from Murdoch's in Toowoomba.
And she lives in Toowoomba, yeah. No, that's fine. But I think that's a very important role, and in a lot of ways, someone that the family are very comfortable with, so that they know that you'd leave someone who the family are going to listen to and trust, and can work for their benefit. So after that, there's really and that might be two people too, for whatever reason.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now after that. And the other reason I wrote this list out, and this is certainly not disrespectful to anyone, but a lot of times I would strike clients and I'd say, now, does your spouse know, who your financial planner is? Does your spouse know who your accountant, your solicitor, your other advisors, your real estate guy? And I'm going to tell you, 9 times out of 10, I sort of get this blank look. And so for all those reasons as well, it's really important to get this list together so that those that are left behind, for example, if mum and dad both passed away, you'd want, the kids may have absolutely no idea who you've been taking advice from, and also there's times where, sure, you've got your normal accountant, you've got your normal solicitor and other professional advisors, but you may have gone off and done a deal with another business, with another mate, another business partner, in a little venture off to the side, and you've used someone else's accountant and solicitor for that work. May not have even been your own. And, you just want to make sure that when you go, any assets that you own are actually documented somewhere, so that just because your own accountant doesn't know about it, somebody along the way does. So anyway, the next name I put down is a financial advisor. So, and that can be the guy that's organised all the life insurance and all those sorts of things as well. So that's a key person to make sure you've got on the list.
Yeah, and the financial advisor particularly would be able to provide the necessary information about life insurance that you have in place, or superannuation that you have in place. And not only are these people now particularly relevant after your death, but these are the people that your lawyer that's prepared your estate planning will be talking to when you put your estate planning in place, particularly the financial advisor and the accountant, because they have the information about as I said, your life insurance and your super, and we'll talk about accountants in a minute. But I think you made a really good point there, Mark, that even though a spouse might know who the financial advisor and accountant is, it is 99.9% likely that the children won't. So,
No.
This really assists in that terrible scenario if something happened to both or the other had already predeceased. So that's the sort of information that they'll be providing, which is essential. Your life insurance and superannuation these days is a really large part of your estate planning and what happens after death.
Yeah, especially superannuation. It's just getting more and more complicated all the time these days, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I know, in the 10 years since I was last a financial advisor, I mean, I'd hate to be giving anyone any advice in superannuation at the moment, because everything has changed so very much from the days that I was certainly involved in it. So it's important to have a financial advisor, and to be honest, even if you don't have a good relationship with a financial advisor, or you haven't used one, I get people to put down someone that they'd want to have there, so that the family had someone that they could trust to help them after the person has passed. Because even though, for example, there's a lot of business, well, I won't say a lot, but there's a number of business owners that their whole investment strategy is their business, their whole superannuation fund is their business, and they haven't gone outside to buy shares and do all those sorts of things. They haven't had a need for a financial planner from that point of view. But I always get people to write down someone that they'd want, because chances are when they die, when they pass, there will be cash, there will be money sitting around that needs to be invested and needs to be looked after, especially if we go to areas of superannuation and so on.
Absolutely, and as you say, there might be that need for that investment advice afterwards. We were only talking today about, these things are constantly evolving. We were talking today in our office as part of our team about life insurance and superannuation and how we, can best strategize that in estate planning. But a lot of people, as we've spoken about before, don't realise that your super and your life insurance don't necessarily flow through your estate and your will.
No.
And so there's all these complexities that are really important to address with the right people in your A team.
Yeah, look, absolutely, I like that. So we call the tactical team the A team, okay?
Oh no, I don't want to change your name. We're going to we'll keep it the tactical team.
We can put a subtitle in there.
I'm a child of the 80s, or the 70s actually, but.
Yeah, stop showing off. Okay. So the next one's the accountant, and obviously a very integral part of the estate planning process, and certainly will be a key part in regard to moving forward after someone has passed. Because, look, at the end of the day, when I go through and we do this work with clients, 8 times out of 10, when I ask a client to sit down and list all their assets, all their liabilities, I mean, my attention span's pretty short as it is, but you don't have to laugh.
No comment.
But mostly the business owners too are of the same, I'll say the word Colby profile that I am. They're quick starts and low attention to detail. And most of the details of assets, liability, taxation, corporate structures and so on,
Yeah.
The accountant knows everything and the client knows about 10% of it. So it's really, really important to make sure that we've got the details of the accountant, the key person that they use in that firm, because they're going to be an integral part, not only of preparing the estate plan, but this is not so much about putting the will in place. This is what the family will need if someone passes away. So once again, a really, really important part of the whole process. And sometimes people have 2 accountants, one for business and one for personal.
Absolutely, and it's very common to find that the individual is not as familiar, obviously, as the accountant, but mostly relies on the accountant for certain information, and particularly with the structures that you mentioned. If there's trusts or companies involved, that's where the accountant really comes in and is worth their weight in gold to give that advice. And there could be things like loans or inter-entity loans or unpaid entitlements to beneficiaries in trusts. So there's all these little nuances that the information from the accountant is so important.
Yeah, I was just falling asleep. You were talking about all that detail stuff.
This is the stuff we love, Mark. We love this stuff.
That's right. That's why we're a good team. See,
We don't want to make you fall asleep, though.
No, that's right. But no, that's a very important part of it. Now, the Next box I've got here is lawyer. So do I just put Murdochs in there? Do
Yeah,
I?
you can if you want. That'd be great.
Tom, Leanne, and Juanita are Murdochs.
Sure.
No,
All right.
that's
Well,
right. But I mean,
I will elaborate. I think one thing to point out here is when someone passes away, we've already spoken about what your executor's role is, and an executor can do everything themselves if they wish and if they're capable, or an executor can engage a lawyer to do all of the estate administration for them. Or you can have bits and pieces. So an executor might choose to do the things that they are capable of doing, and the more complex things engage a lawyer to assist with. So obviously here it's, I suppose, two recommendations: either a lawyer that's familiar with your your existing lawyer, a lawyer that's done your estate planning, that's familiar with yourself and your details, or secondly, and or hopefully someone who's very capable and can do a good job are the two most important things here, I would say.
sure. And look, I'm a great believer in specialty. So I mean, obviously there's the estate planning lawyer. Let me just turn my light up a little here. It's there's the estate planning lawyer that's put all the stuff together for the will and the succession plan and so on. But I mean, part of the whole process might be that some of the property has to be sold. Some of there's other issues that need to be covered off, whatever that aren't estate planning issues, but that you need to. Maybe there's different lawyers, because I'm a great one for specialty. You have the estate planning lawyer, you have the property lawyer, you have other lawyers for other things that might be needed along the way. So, and each one of them hopefully would be a specialist.
Yeah, and I would also just add here to round that out is that if an executor ever comes across a situation where there's an estate dispute, or there's some litigation on foot or a potential dispute, then it's really important to get advice from a lawyer who has expertise in that area, because it is a very important area and important things to address. You can't just brush it under the carpet.
Very good. Okay, now after the lawyer, I just put other advisors. Now this is a whole raft of opportunities here. So, for example, I don't qualify in any of the top few there, but I mean, if I've been working with clients, obviously, if we're one of their key advisors, because we're the people that bring all this stuff together. But I mean, other people you'd put down here would be real estate. Might be real estate people. There might be, for example, they may have a proprietary business where they're running and they have intellectual issues and so on, and there might be a lawyer to do with that. But certainly the first thing that comes to mind is a real estate person.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to the car industry. If you wanted to sell your car dealership, I just recall in the days, and forgive me if I say the wrong names here, but I mean, it used to be Horse, and then it used to be Deloitte's were the people you'd go to. They had motor dealer services. They'd be the people you'd go to if you wanted, if Dad died, the dealership sitting there, your mate's coming in and he's running it for 2 or 3 months to help you out. And the first thing I'd send people off was to Deloitte's to get their motor dealer division to come out and find a buyer for the business. So, whoever that is in whatever business you're involved in, if you're in the rural area, one of the local stock and station agents or whoever, but it just gives you the chance to write down all the other people that are relevant to your business that you'd want your family to rely on, because socially you can be friends with all these different people, while you're a happy family and everyone goes out and you have a great social time. But sometimes the key breadwinner in the business may have business dealings, and he might say, well, that guy's or that woman's great from a social point of view, but for goodness sake, please don't do any business with them, because we don't trust them, or they're not capable deep down. So it's a good way for people to be able to advise those that are left behind on who they should utilise, who they should trust.
Yeah, and I think some good examples are, firstly, the one you just gave as far as a real estate agent goes. So it may be even as simple as you have an investment property that you're renting. So writing down here who the real estate agent is that manages that investment property, making it easier for your executor after you've gone. If you have a rural property, it may be the person here that you want your spouse or your children to pick up the phone and talk to for advice to get the business and through those initial stages and give you that advice to get through. So it might be the neighbour down the road. So that's another good example. You could go on depending on your individual situation.
And the reason we give so many options here is that because a lot of times, and especially rural, families and so on, mum and dad are just going to be as capable as each other and know all these people anyway. But we've got to look at the worst case scenario and assume both mum and dad do pass, and the kids are just sitting there going, "Holy mackerel! What do we do? Who do we turn to? Who do we trust? Who do we avoid?" And that's really why we've created this document, so that whoever's left behind, if there's an absolute tragedy, that everyone they will ever need to talk to is on that list.
Yeah,
why do I have so much trouble putting that in the middle?
I don't know. How about that?
That's very good, very good.
I think one thing that I'll just pick up on that you said there, Mark, we really focused on the people that you want your family and your executors to contact to get the information, but it's also an opportunity just to put down perhaps the people not to, or the people to be wary
absolutely.
of. For that reason, this is also a very important tool, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I probably didn't mention that last week when we were talking about the Dear Mary letter, but in the original Dear Mary letter we used to utilise, that was one of the sections was, okay, who do we avoid? And you've got to be careful writing that down, because if the people who are on the list ever see the list, it's not going to be a good outcome.
Yeah,
but I used to always ask people, like, who are the people who you're mates with, who your family might lean on, but you, from your experience and wisdom, would want your family to avoid those people. And I think that's important to put that down. Absolutely. Because there'll always be people with hidden agendas and so on wanting to take advantage of situations too. So need to be aware of that. Any other comments? Juanita, I think we've
really covered it, and I hope we've explained and sort of passed on the value in putting this team together, which is what we started talking about at the outset of today, just how much easier it can make life for those that are left behind to do their job and to get through that difficult time.
Yeah, look, I'm just going to take a second, if I may. I'm actually in the middle of putting together my next webinar script and talking about all these sorts of tools that we bundle all together. And one of the most important things is you've got two choices in life. You can either just forget about this and just say, you know what, I'm okay. You can be invincible. You can procrastinate. You can you can just let it go and say, I'll get to this one day. The day before I die, I'll fill all this stuff out. It just making life so hard for those left behind, if that's your attitude. And but because this is the stuff which really saves the families when you're gone, because it just makes life so simple. It's whether it's what you want to happen, at your funeral, whatever it is. All these sorts of tools are designed for you to be a hero for your family and for you to just make life so easy. And the other thing is when you've got this list, you eliminate the family squabbles and the fights, because if you've got 3-4 kids and whoever the parent is that's left behind, they'll be arguing over this stuff. They'll say, oh no, Dad would have wanted us to use Fred, and Mum or Dad will be saying, no, they wanted us to use Harry. And so if you can create this, it just takes all the arguments, all the discussions out of the way, and it just creates harmony within the family, and it just makes it an easier transition from pre-death to post-death. Everybody.
And it helps you find things too, not only get advice, but find where the hell everything is, because obviously we often find executors that just have no idea.
Yeah, the accountant always has it.
Or the lawyer.
The lawyer, that's right. Okay, great spending time with you again, Juanita. Thank you for your wisdom today, and look forward to catching up with everyone next week. See you next Wednesday, 4 p.m.
See you later.
Thanks, bye.